I love this purple dragon you've got on your.
Oh, it's so nice.
That is really cool. That is very
The
cool.
little purple animation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I thought this was really neat the way they kind of fly through, and you can see like he goes over the logo, like he goes under the text and over the logo, and so it gives a nice three-dimensional look. And
Yeah.
there's a couple of them that go in. He flies in slightly different patterns. This was all done just by a Fiverr artist for me. That's how I've done.
Wow.
That's how I've done a lot of my stuff. I just work through Fiverr. I give them a concept. Amanda, I'm assuming you have sound now. I believe I fixed. If it's the same issue, it typically has been. Sometimes my audio source resets when I reboot my PC. I don't know why it does that. Yeah, I thought so. Very good, very good. When you do this as many times as I have, you know all the places you screw up, so you can fix them quick.
Fair enough.
See, now Amanda can hear me calling her slacker.
There you are.
Yeah, so if they're like, so I'll tell you what I have at my fingertips here, Stephen, in case you want me to bring anything else up. I have, dun, 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 dun. You go back here, desktop, Troll Lord Games, and PDFs. All right, so I have, why did my view reset? I have the world map, the human migrations map, the weather map. I have the Andanuth. I have among the codexes, I have the Codex of Airdhe expansion, the original Codex of Airdhe. I have the Darkenfold. I have the Gotland expansion, the Environs of Alrag. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got the 1320. I got the 5th edition player's guide, the regular player's handbook, the Castle Keeper's digital guide, Monsters and Treasure, and then the, as I said, the Codex of Airdhe. And so I've got.
You're running a session today? I mean, what's going on?
Just,
I mean, those are all individual LMAs on their own.
I know. I'm just like, if Steven wants to refer to something in one of these guides and wants me to pull it up, I'm just letting him know what I have. I'm not expecting to cover all that.
I remembered to grab this for once, having it at my fingertips instead of going searching, because I figured it was easier than digging through the codex.
Yeah, and I've got all these guys in hard copy too, which are glorious. Very good stuff. Hello, Sam.
I need to take a picture of my collection. I need to make space so I can take a picture of my collection.
There you go.
It's huge at this point.
All right, it is 5:30. We're going to go ahead and switch over to live. You will be now not just heard, but also seen in 3, 2, and 1. All right, welcome to Blue Box and Loremaster's Arcanum number 85. Yes, we've been doing it that long, and we are joined here tonight again by none other than Stephen Chenault, the CEO and founder of Troll Lord Games. And Stephen also is the creative genius behind the world of Airdhe and so much of the content that they produce. And he dropped knowledge on us last time he was here. People had a headache for 3 days trying to absorb all the things that he shared with us. I'm also joined tonight by Rachel. You know Rachel as the new player that we have coming on our Tears of Airdhe campaign, which will begin Sunday, September 4th. And yes, as was asked last time, at Blue Box, we really felt it was time to expand our player base into middle school players. And so I really appreciate Rachel being willing to volunteer and join us for this. I asked her before the stream if it was okay if I teased her about how young she looks. All right, and then I'm joined.
Not a minor. I promise.
By the way, that means you have to change the rating. We have to go from PG-13 to PG.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm joined also tonight by Robert. You know him as Phantom and Jay. Hey, Benjamin. Yes, I will be careful. And Benjamin, this is to be a good night for us. Watch the audio sync. I'm on a different view, so I reset the sync at 150 millisecond delay. So let me know how that looks, and we'll tweak it until it's absolutely perfect tonight, and you can help me with that because he's my resident detail guy when it comes to audio. But yeah, we're going to have a fun conversation tonight. I want to do a couple of announcements. And then we're going to jump right into the dialogue. And of course, we did a pretty wide-ranging conversation last time about the lore of Airdhe, going back all the way to the very first thoughts of the Allfather, which spawned the universe into existence really unwittingly, even without intent. And then what came through that, and how the gods were formed, and the races, and the dwarves being the first, and the chosen, and how all the other races came. So I think this would be a really fun night to get a little bit more granular and practical with how you take that and use it to do character creation in the world of Airdhe. Whether you're playing CNC or 5e or 3.5 or whatever you're playing, that world can transcend any system. And I thought maybe we could even do some stuff on current political currents which might play into character creation, current religious currents that might play into character creation. We talked a little bit about some of the major themes, but I think there's a lot more we could dive into. And really any other areas, Stephen, that you think tonight could help spark creativity in the minds of people that want to play in the world of Airdhe, for how they could create characters that are compelling and match the world that you've created. So be thinking about that. And Robert, I told you before the stream tonight, because you are really more knowledgeable in Airdhe than even I am at this point, so I want you to be able to help guide the discussion tonight. And then Rachel, your perspective, of course, will be really unique, because you'll be coming in with the least knowledge, and I don't say that disparagingly. I say it's because it's a good thing. So you're going to have, if you have questions, things that don't make sense, directions that you don't be afraid to ask anything tonight. And if we say something that you want some clarification on, please ask for that, and then we'll do our best to answer your questions. So I do have the World of Airdhe map up right now, and I'm focused on that area, the Fontanook and the Twilight Woods. And let's see if Rachel can answer this question. Rachel, why am I focused on that area right now on my map?
Because that's the area that we're starting.
Exactly. And yes, and we're starting there because of what city that will be there?
Ooh, the one. Oh, no. Oh, no. The one.
The one. Yes, the one.
I love it.
The one in the middle of it. All right. No, it's gonna be I think it's the northwest piece of the Twilight Forest, right there against the mountains. But anyway, it's because the free city of Altamira, which is Lord Gazumba, Jay Scott's creation in the world of Greyhawk, is now being created as a box set in the world of Airdhe. And Stephen, do we even have like a wag on when that's going to be? Is that like a mid-year 2023 type thing, or what's the thought?
Okay, we'll probably do a Kickstarter on it early next year is my guess. Jay's trying to get it written before we actually do that. And once it's written, at that point, it really just kind of falls together. It takes about 6 months. So if we're lucky, we'll see it this time next year. Would be very, very nice.
Okay, very good. That would be excellent. But we will be way ahead of the curve, because we'll be playing in that city, in this world, on September 4th. So I've got all the content from Stephen, but I'm also getting data from Jay. Jay's sending me some advanced information on the stuff that he's writing. So we'll be doing sort of an advanced playthrough of a lot of that stuff that will be in Altamira. Now, what's also very cool is that box set being worked on by Trollord Games and Jay will include, as I mentioned last night, cartography and I believe heraldry from Anna B. Meyer. And so you're going to have a really cool set, and just seeing sort of the merge of all these different creators, and it's a really neat thing to see. Last couple of... Sorry, go ahead.
I got a sneak peek at some of those maps that Anna that she's working on. It is going to be absolutely fantastic. We'll talk about some of that.
She's kind of good at that, I think, isn't she?
Crazy, right?
She's got a bit of talent.
Yeah, I think.
I totally do it for a living.
I think she's got a future in that field. I don't know. I somebody should tell her that. No, that's fantastic. And yes, Anna's maps and heraldry. Hey, Tim, good to see you. Benjamin, you said the audio sync is so close to perfect. Do I need to bump it up or down in milliseconds? I want it. I don't want it so close to. I want it perfect. All right. The last couple things I'll announce before we get into the discussion tonight is our upcoming schedule. So on Sunday, we will have, from Trollord Games, Chuck. Chuck from TLG will be running a game for us on Sunday from 1:30 to 4:30, so our normal Sunday time slot. As you know, we're trying to fill with one-shots and content creators here in our community until we start our regular campaign launch. in September. So if you can join, we already have 1 or 2 players, but we're looking for 2 or 3 more players. So if we have anyone here that's interested in the chat on Discord, you can absolutely jump in there and let Mystical Unicorn Manda know that you'd like to play on Sunday, and she'll get you all set up with that with Chuck. Then next Tuesday, Robert, you're going to be DMing a game. Do you have any kind of preview you can give us yet, or are you still working through that?
Oh no, I mean I don't have a working title for the game yet, but I can tell you that the 3 players that I tortured a bit on Sunday have decided to come back for more, and I've got 2 more joining them. In addition, it's going to be Chaosic, Vicky, Sweet Katie, and Vivi is going to be joining us. So as well as Hagar the Harpy will be joining us. So.
I like
Yeah. I haven't decided what kind of torture I've devised for them this time.
Robert, Hagar's always hounding me about possums because a year ago in my stream I found this baby possum, I took it in and kind of nursed it back to health and let it go. So he's always hounding me, so do something with a possum. I don't know why.
Well, it's a very, very nature-oriented group, so yeah, I can figure out how to put a possum in there somewhere. But yeah, no, it's gonna be a fun time.
Yeah, that will be a blast. And
it will be Castles and Crusades. Just wanted to put that out.
Excellent.
Yeah, and we've gotten the comment a lot. In fact, it came up again. Robert DM'd last week, and it came up from the players again. How easy it is to pick up the CNC system, even though they had never played it before. And I know that's kind of a hallmark of what you guys have tried to create, and you've done a good job with it. So. All right, so let's go ahead and get started tonight with the chat. And Stephen, I'd say maybe a good place to start would be understanding some of the uniquenesses in the races of Airdhe. And for example, we know there are, I believe, 4 different distinct types of elves. 6. Okay. So why don't we start there? Elves are always a popular race. Just kind of talk through with us the different types of elf and their backgrounds and how that affects the character creation.
So the elves come into existence during the reigning years of the Goblin Dwarf Wars, when the Goblin sorcerer Onlush, he casts this spell that is so egregiously huge and uncontrollable that it shatters the mind of the Allfather. And the Allfather is for all practical purposes, he's destroyed. Now this is actually part of what the Allfather does. He's actually, transforming into something else. The Sea of Dreams actually, to begin the whole thing over. That's actually the first step towards the Gonfod, which will begin the whole circle of life and all that business. But so when his mind is shattered, many of the creatures come to Airdhe that you don't see in the histories early on. The orcs are one, the elves are another. So when the elves come to the world, they come to the world just to the west of the Marl, which is this gigantic mountain range off of the lands of Earth, the map that you see behind me. And the orcs come into the world in the Marl as well. And both are relatively primitive. They don't know what's going on. They don't have any guidance from the gods like the earlier peoples did, but they almost immediately begin warring on one another. Orcs are extraordinarily evil, and they visit this onto the elves pretty quickly. Winifar, she's one of the goddesses. She eventually takes the elves kind of in tow, and then they begin wandering the world. So that's your basic race of elves, are the elves. They don't really create kingdoms. They don't really do anything like that. They don't formulate themselves like the humans and dwarves do. They wander in small bands and in family groups, and these sort of coalesce. They're immortal creatures. They're more fey than they are, anything else. So they're immortal. But as time progresses, particularly with Unclars coming to the world, you start seeing the elven peoples splinter. So this is thousands of years after they've arrived. They get wind that Unclar is going to be summoned to the world and the Winterdark is coming. So they sit and have a great debate. All of their leaders and family, clan leaders and all this stuff gather together, and they kind of vote in unison to leave, to go to the land of Fae, to the land of Seven Rivers, and to leave the world of Airdhe behind, because they know what the humans are fixing to visit upon it by summoning Unclar. Well, there's the first splits happening there because some of the elves absolutely refuse to go. They want to stand by their dwarven friends or their human friends and fight Unklar. Some don't even go to the meeting. They just wander in, the wilderness by themselves because they could care less what everybody else is doing. So when the winter dark comes, most of the elves have left. Those are your high elves, and some of the elves have stayed. And those who stayed, this is where Robert was talking about break into several branches. You've got the Twilight Elves stay in the Twilight Wood, and that's going to be very near where Altamira is. And then you've got Wild Elves that just kind of wander the world. The world changed, the winter dark came, they just kept wandering and adjusted to it. The Wood Elves are kind of roughly the same. But those high elves who purposely stayed to fight, those become the Fontenoche. Actually, those aren't the Fontenoche. Those are, I can't remember what they're called.
High elves?
The what?
The high elves?
Well, they're sort of the high elves. The high elves there's three branches of them, and they're kind of all the same. The elves that leave, and there's deep bitterness between these three groups, because you have a whole group that left, and those that went to Chandelier and settled in the lands of Fae split almost immediately into two groups. One feels guilty about abandoning the world when they see what Unklar has done, and they want to go back. But the wizards who control the gates, keep the gates are closed. And then, you're right, Robert, those high elves who stay, I think they're called the Vale. They're from the Vale. But the queen of the elves stays with them, and they do this just long, exaggerated campaign under Prince Meltog Lathian that lasts for the better part of 1,000 years, fighting Unklar constantly. But they're slowly weeded away. Queen is eventually killed in some heroic battle against orcs and a blue dragon, if I recall. But their numbers are weeded down to almost nothing. Now, fast forward through the Winter Dark, when the gates are opened by the Council of Light, and that's part of the game that we played back in the 80s and the 90s. When the gates are opened, those elves that had went to Chandelier, that had went to the Land of Seven Rivers, the Land of Fae, and had desired to come back, were sitting at the gate, armored and ready to go. They've been sitting there for hundreds of years, ready to go. So as soon as those gates open, those elves spill through and begin this bloodthirsty crusade across the face of Airdhe, destroying evil wherever they see it. And those are the Fontenoche elves. Those are the elves that you guys are going to run into the Altamira. Now, high elves that stay, the Chandelier elves, I guess that's what Robert's talking about. The high elves are those who stayed, but the Chandelier elves are those who never returned. They occasionally come back. But they're going to be, if you want a kind of a reference to it, those are going to be the elves of Valinor, in Middle Earth. Those elves who went and didn't pursue the Silmarils or any of that. These are extraordinarily intelligent, steeped in sorcery, ancient elves and whatnot. But those Fontenoche who came back, all the high elves who came back, and then the elves of the Vale are those who stayed. And you got your wild and your Twilight elves and your wood elves that are meandering. But I hope I answered that.
One question I have, because I didn't quite get all the way through it. Are the gates that they came through, are those the rings of brass, or is it a different type of gate?
So the rings of brass, so this tree that you see here on the screen, that is the great tree. The first thing of life that the Allfather was able to make was this tree, and it was actually lifeless. He made this tree, he had this idea, but he didn't know what to do with it, so he made this tree. And its branches go up and into the cosmos, and its roots go out and into the cosmos. And it wasn't until the goddess Mordias came along and said, hey, look, we can make this thing alive, that the tree actually blossoms, and there's leaves suddenly and the whole thing. And Winifar comes along and creates birds and all this other stuff. But the roots and branches of those trees, specifically the roots, snake throughout all of the cosmos. Well, at some point in the early days of Airdhe's creation, there's if you remember, you're going to have to go back to the other screen, but there's the Allfather and then the goddess Inzea, the dragon goddess Inzea, who's spinning upon the maelstrom, and she's just ripping the fabric of the universe apart. But when she sees the Allfather create a world, she creates another world beneath his. So his world is flat in those days, and hers is like a cup. So think of a saucer and a cup upside down. But at one point, she doesn't know what to do with this thing. She doesn't have the idea of creation. Hers is just destruction. So she goes to the Allfather and says, I don't know what I'm doing here, help out. wasn't quite like that. She's kind of trying to be sneaky about him, but they trade. I think she gives him this clutch of dragon eggs, and that's how dragons come to Airdhe, and that's why dragons are ferociously intelligent and many very, very evil. But in return, he gives her trees, and she steals when she does some of the dwarves, some of the larger dwarves. They're called the Trotican giants in the world of Isaiah. Now, these Trotican giants want to get back to the world of Airdhe something fiercely. So from Isaiah, they discover the roots of this giant tree, and they begin to hollow the roots out, making these tunnels that eventually get them to Airdhe. But they also create these tunnels that go everywhere else, from Elysian Fields to Valhalla to all this other stuff. So you have these two worlds sort of connected between the rings of brass. Now, to answer your question, it's a really long answer to your question. To answer your question, the Castle of Spires is a castle that is actually north of Altamira, and that is where one of the gates existed that went to Shindelay, and that takes you through the Rings of Brass and immediately to Shindelay. The way the rings work, if you want to go to point A and point B, and you know both intimately, all you have to do is think about it and step through. If you don't know where you're going, if you just wander into the Rings of Brass, you could wander there for eternity and never find a gate, or you could find a gate in 10 minutes. It's all up to chance, how it goes. But if you know where you're going, and when Daladon opened that gate in the Castle of Spires, he knew where he was going. So he opened a gate, and it was kind of an interesting scenario, because Charlie was playing his character Daladon, and while he was opening the gate, the Fontenot elves were so keyed and ready to go, they began spilling through before he could do anything. So he just watched this army spill through the Castle of Spires, and the Crusades spread out from the Twilight Wood. Mayhem followed. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
No.
The lore is pretty involved.
There's a lot, yeah. That's awesome.
And Stephen, you never need to apologize for long answers. We're accustomed to that from you. We know that's what's going to happen when we bring you on. I love a lot of the artwork that I see in these codexes. It's really cool artwork and just nicely done. It's got a consistent theme to it. But coming back to the elves, for example, and you cover these various types of elves, do they include? I know in the CNC system, it really emphasizes being streamlined and easy. But do they include differences in the modifiers, whether that be statistical, whether it be skills and abilities? Do they have different levels of infravision or hearing, or anything else which translates to a tangible difference in character creation beyond the story elements of it?
So there's two things that. One of the design philosophies in everything that we do, from Castles and Crusades and the World of Airdhe, is to leave as much of the playing side and the creative side away from the publisher, to whoever's picking the game up and the world up. So we really try not to restrict what anyone wants to do much. So your standard Castles and Crusades elf ports into Airdhe with 0 issues. Any elf you're going to play is going to port into it. Now, when I wrote for the Player's Guide to Airdhe, I created a class called the Elf. And I know that appears in the 5th edition Player's Guide to Airdhe as well. So it's like if you think way back to the basic set where you played a dwarf.
Right.
You didn't stick. Now that's the Player's Handbook. I'm talking about the one, Robert, you had it. That one there's the Player's Guide to Airdhe.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, and we've got a 5th edition version of that. But if you choose to go that route, you can play an elf, and that's what you are. You're not an elven fighter. You're not an elven whatever. And those elves haven't been in a while, but I'm pretty sure they've got spell-using abilities. So that elf comes sort of like it's already a wizard fighter wizard type thing. But there are some nuances that are spelled out in the Player's Guide to Airdhe if you're playing a wood elf or a wild elf. But they're not much. They're not very much, because it's pretty much the same beast.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So then, I didn't realize this. So in CNC base, you have an elf in very much the same way you had it in the basic edition, where it's both a race and a class.
Yes, that's in the Player's Guide to Airdhe, and the Player's Handbook is just an elf with some abilities. And then so if you're playing Castles and Crusades, the Player's Handbook, you would make it an elven fighter, an elven wizard, an elven rogue, whatever. But if you want, and your CK/DM allows it, you can actually play an elf from the Player's Guide to Airdhe.
Sure.
And it's just got nuance in it. It's like you said. It's like those old, what was it, dwarf, the halfling? I can't remember what they are.
No, it was dwarf and elf. It was just dwarf and elf that were actual. They were both class and race. Yeah.
I never played the elf. I played the dwarf. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, dwarves are always my favorite, too. Rachel, so we just covered a lot there, and I know you got a lot last time as well. Anything you have a question about or anything that you wanted clarification or even a comment?
The rings of brass are super cool. I like the idea of that just in general. That's never been a part of any sort of campaign setting I've been a part of. Naturally, because it's Airdhe. It's an Airdhe. But I'm very excited about that. I don't know if we'll probably see it at some point, maybe. I don't know where this is going, but I'm very excited.
Well, it's designed. I'm glad to hear that, because it's designed so that any level, if your CK wants to take you or DM wants to take you, on plane traveling, you can do it. You don't have to be a bajillionth level. You just have to have a gate. Like if you go to the adventure module C1, is that right? C2, Shades of Mist, which is the 3rd level adventure. If you go to the bottom of that, there's this huge wooden rune carved hatch that if you open it, you're in that's the rings of brass. There's steps that lead down into the rings of brass. So you could be a 1st level, pop the hatch, walk down it, and then now of course your DM's going to have to level it,
Yeah,
you can't be
for sure.
a Demogorgon, but or whatever. But yeah, that's the way it was designed that way, so that anyone can just dive into it, however stylistically you want.
I do have a question. How public is the knowledge of the rings of brass? Like, I assume that most people know of their existence.
So probably only your sages and whatnot. Most just common people wouldn't know. So in World of Air, and again, I leave this open to interpretation to whoever's running it. The way I run it in the World of Air, high-level wizards and illusionists, priests and whatnot, are relatively rare. They're not very common. It's hard to get there. You got so few hit points at 1st level, you just don't survive. And they're very powerful, as we all know. When you get 20th level wizard, it's just ludicrous the power that they command. So those aren't very common. The rings of brass would be known by probably anyone. So if you designed your character and you wanted your character to have a religious bent to it, to have some kind of background where you're a little bit steeped in the religious lore, you're gonna probably know about it, without a doubt. If you have anyone that's intellectually curious, rogue who studies ancient texts, you're gonna know about it. It's so much into it. However, if you're just a fighter who's a member of the Cult of the Swords who just wants to carve your way to Valhalla.
To fight, yeah.
Yeah, right. Not too much. But really, so however you're wanting to design your character, you can absorb all that information. And the nice thing about it, because the rings of brass, they're not contained. There's no definition that there's 14 roots, right? There's as many as you can imagine, or as few as you want. So that the CK can literally, or DM can literally, yes, you know of the rings of brass. You are familiar with 5 or 6 of these tunnels that may go to Valhalla or wherever, but you don't. So that leaves a lot of stuff for you to grow into, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, fantastic question though. And real quick, Robert, I want to answer answer one question and ask another, and then Robert, you can take over because I really want you to have some questions tonight. But so in the chat, one of the questions was the cast. John Demongund, he is our resident, fantastic artisan inside some of the leading VTTs out there right now. He's done a lot of work in Tailspire. He's got a brand new system also that he's working with. He's got a Patreon, and he's going to be you're going to see some of his work at Virtual GreyhawkCon, and he's also been on stream with us before. And John, so he's asking about who's with us tonight. So the gentleman that's on your far left that walked out of the room and then just walked back in with a beer, that is Stephen Chenault. That is Stephen Chenault. He is the founder and CEO of Troll Lord Games. Tonight we're discussing the world that was created by Stephen. Stephen, when did you start writing? How long has Airdhe been in the works?
So, I'm a huge Greyhawk fan. I love Greyhawk. It's in my blood. Started playing Greyhawk back in 1980 or whatever the heck. And then I joined the Army in the first Gulf War. Ended up stationed in Hawaii by myself out there. No one was I played a little bit of 2nd edition. That was about it. And I wrote this novel. We had played Greyhawk. We had because we knew I was joining the Army, we had played Greyhawk. We played the campaign to kind of an ending point. where Unclar actually comes to the world and does all of that. So when I was in the army, I sat down and I wrote a novel. It's really kind of it's a fantasy novel, but it's a romance tied in with this sour love affair that creates this guy that uses music to create all of this evil and demons and all of this other stuff to go back and punish his father's kingdom type thing. And that's the genesis of Unclar right there. That kind of becomes the genesis. I take that concept because I loved it so much, and I began expanding it into changing the world of Greyhawk completely. So I spent this is going to be about 1992 or so. I spent a good year just crafting what I wanted the world post my army time and post ending the Greyhawk game was going to be like. So you can see, if you look carefully, and I can talk about this all day, you can see the influence of Greyhawk on the map behind you.
Sure.
Theomar, Keoland. I mean, there's certain things that are just the Darkenfold and what was the Dreadwood. There's just certain things that I carried over, and I carried them over primarily because the game needed some kind of continuity. But because Unclar came to the world and destroyed everything, I could change as much as I wanted. So that's what I did. And then I started writing these. I didn't even have a word processor. I wrote letters to everyone in the game. And these letters, about once a week, I was a combat signaler in the army, which is, your job is to lay wire for combat units. So if you're not in combat, you don't have a lot to do.
Yeah, right.
I was in barracks a lot. So I wrote these long letters describing what was unfolding in the world and how it was developing it. I don't know, we've all got them somewhere, but that kind of begins the genesis of it. And then we played through the 90s. We did the whole, when you're looking at the Codex of Airdhe, you'll see the Winter Dark Wars. Those Winter Dark Wars are our games that ran from 1993 when I got into the army until 1999. Well, that 2002 or so, something like that, when they overthrew Unclar and ended all of that. Those Winter Dark Wars that you see in there that is already year by year. And you can see little campaigns in there. You know, when you read it, this must have been what you see as a paragraph will be like 2 months of play, right? That we unfolded this adventure that was surrounding or whatever. So that really kind of formulated. And then when Mac Golden, so Troller Games was founded by myself, Mac Golden, and my brother Davis, and it was really Mac's idea to create Troller Games. He said, he was doing this little design called Seeker, and I was trying to get published with TSR. He said, let's do our own company. OGL's coming out, D20's coming out. Let's do this thing. And then we did 3 little adventures. I think we were going to sell at Gen Con 2000. And they told us if we did a 4th book, these are all 24 pages, if we did a 4th book, they'd give us a huge discount. And Mac was in law school. Davis was an archaeologist out west. Kathy, my wife, we had just had our first baby. I was doing work on my PhD, and I was staying home with the baby. So Mac said, dude, just write up your World of Airdhe stuff. Just write it up. So I sat down over like 2 or 3 week period and wrote this. Got it here. This one goes way back. This tiny little 24 page after Winter Dark fantasy campaign setting. And that becomes Airdhe. It sold so insanely well in its first year that I sat down and wrote the Codex of Airdhe after that and released it.
That's fantastic. Wow, what a great story. Yeah. So the other question that came up in the chat, and oh, by the way, so the other folks on the stream, John, we have Robert, you know him, that's Phantom NJ. He'll be running a game for us on Tuesday. And this is Rachel. Rachel is our newest player in our Sunday campaigns coming up on September 4th, and she'll be playing in Tears of Airdhe. The question in chat was, and Robert already gave an answer, which was partially incorrect because he said 3.5 is no fun, and it is. But he said...
Didn't say that. Didn't even hint at it.
Hey, it's not an LMA if Robert and I don't disagree on at least one thing. So I purposefully provoke it if I have to. Stephen, how close would you say C&C is? And I know this is slightly off topic because we're talking about Airdhe tonight, but how close would you say C&C is to the original, either Red Box or AD&D or even like the OSRIC?
So I would land it closest to AD&D. The reason I would do that is because of 2 reasons. When Mac and Davis created Castles and Crusades. They did all of the mechanics for it. When you're reading the player's handbook, CKG or whatever, and you see descriptive text or how-to stuff, that's me. But the rules, the actual heart of Castles and Crusades, the Siege Engine, Davis and Mac Golden created. Davis Chenault in the road. So Now I forgot. What was your question?
No, how close is it to Osric? I think you already answered it. Yeah.
Well, so when Mac began creating it, he told me what because I was going to be the salesman for it. He said, "What do you need?" And my comment was, "It's got to be very near AD&D because I am a huge AD&D fan. I absolutely love the game. I never played Basic much. I never played Expert much. If I did, it would be a one-shot. Then I'd go back to AD&D, or when my brother was running." So I started DMing in 1980. Davis, my brother, started in 1976 running me games in the little brown books, right? And then, but he never, to this day, I'm really not sure what we played because he would buy stuff and just give me characters and tell me to do things, and then I would go kill things.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
Yeah.
So he had this hodgepodge of books. I remember when he got the Monster Manual, and I remember when he got the Player's Handbook. Beyond that, I don't. So he may have taken stuff from the basic set, or whatever. But I'm an AD&D hound, so CNC to me is most like AD&D. Having said that, and I'll make this very short, it is we have found that whatever game system you're coming from, if you're coming from 4th edition, 5th edition, Pathfinder, CNC is so malleable to your playing style because of the way the attribute checks are built that you're going to almost immediately just say, "Oh, this is like my game." Because it's basically, you can take the elements of your game and import them, right? You can do almost anything. The attribute check system is insanely malleable.
No, I love that.
It's also what makes it so easy to teach people. It's like they don't have to worry about this, that. It's everything's an attribute check. Just roll.
Yeah, the hardest thing that I've discovered, I've been running this game for a long time now, and at many conventions, the hardest thing I've discovered about Castles and Crusades is convincing people that they can try anything. Because they keep looking at their character sheet. They want that, this is an attribute check. No, just, it's whatever check I tell you to make. Just, you want to do something, try it.
Yeah. Well, no, I love that. And I think that's what I like about the world of Airdhe and the way you have a GM's heart in terms of the way you design things. And so you've created this fantastic, it's much more than a sandbox. It's built out, it's deep, it's full of lore, and yet you've left those nice gaps for the game master and the way that they want to play to fill in. Even this idea, going back to the question about the elves, if I want to play something that's modeled after a Noldor elf, I can do that, and I can fit that into any of the structures that you've created in your game world. I also want to compliment you on the artwork. I'm showing again some of the incredible artwork, and this guy, first of all, he's super cool, but I'm going to test. But also, Stephen, you did say you started DMing in 1980, so I want everyone on the chat to realize that I am both younger and have been DMing longer than Stephen Chenault. So just let the record show, okay? I started in 79 at 8 years old. So, but Robert, you might know this too. The face, the jaw, does that remind you of something as a kid? That looks so. Go ahead.
Playing Diablo.
Okay, no, not ignore the horns. Look at the weight. Look at the face. Look at the. Maybe somebody in chat will get this. Let me zoom in. Does this not remind you of something from your youth? Whoops. I'm so zoomed in. I go too fast. Let me go back up here. See if anybody in the chat gets it. There he is. And come back up here and zoom in. Does that not look like something to you? The goblin faces in the Hobbit, like the Great Goblin, that jaw with the teeth and the eyes and it looks a lot like the faces of the goblins from the original Hobbit cartoon. Anyone else see that, or is it just me? All right, I'll move on.
Lord Gazumba picked up on it. Legend, that movie Legend.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I definitely see with the wide horns and it's got that demonic legend look, but that jaw and all that. So anyway, so go ahead.
Real quick, that piece is done by a gentleman named Nathan Nada. Now Nathan was one. Now Peter Bradley's our primary artist. I love Peter's art. I absolutely do. We've got Zoe. She works with us. Just a great artist now. But Nathan worked with us for a very short period of time. Love this guy. Fell in love with his art instantaneously. But in the middle of doing these deities, and I'm not in any way knocking the guy, he emailed me and he said, "I can't take it anymore. I'm going back to football." That's the last I ever heard from him.
What?
I don't know what it means. I don't know what happened to him. But his art was just insanely beautiful, and I moaned for years about that.
Going back to football, wow, yeah.
Don't motivate. I can't be a football player.
All right, Robert, you had some questions or comments. Go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say that going back to we kind of moved on from the Rings of Brass, but if you're looking for an adventure with the Rings of Brass, it Stains Upon the Green. Has the tie-in between World of Airdhe and the Haunted Highlands, which is another one of TLG's settings.
And
They're
that
darker
one,
settings.
that one gives you a different version of the Rings of Brass because there's a coin.
Really?
The coin in that one allows you. There's a magical coin that opens up into the Rings of Brass. You have this magical coin that transfers.
Interesting.
It's one of those things, John, and I'm glad you picked up on this. That I really, because as a DM, and I DM'd for so long that not quite as long as you, but I
1 year.
I DM'd for so long. Yeah, I DM'd for so long that. And you know, when you're in settings, even like Greyhawk, as much as I love it, there's limitations. If someone's playing an elf and they're 700 years old, well, I don't know what happened 700 years ago. You know what I mean? So you get into this kind of contextual thing that's an issue. And I wanted that solved, but I also wanted the players, the DMs, to be able to go into it and just own it. If you want, these streamers are running. Scarlett, she's doing a fantastic job, but they're doing this. It's just crazy what they're doing there. I love it because they've taken what my vision, made it their own, and they're having a blast with it. And that's really what I wanted to do. The only complaint I've had, and I don't know how to address this, though I'm doing it in no small way, is population. People are always asking me about populations, and I don't like to give them, because you might want a world that's really populated. You might want it's not, and as soon as it's written, right?
Right.
This is the way it is. That's always an issue.
Right. No, that's well said. Go ahead, Robert. You can say something?
Canon is an ugly word. It is. I mean, it's fine. It's fine if you're talking about, if you're talking about Star Wars or whatever. That's fun. As soon as you start talking about canon and TTRPG, battle lines get drawn, things get ugly, and it's never never a good thing. Just
and
the more that you lead up to their.
I mean, it really eclipsed the wings of both the players. And John, you were talking earlier about the creator side of creating player characters. And as soon as you start locking things in, it just stops people. I want to do this. And a good example of this in this game that Scarlett's running, one of the players has taken Eldritch Goblins. Now, Eldritch Goblins are very special in the world of Airdhe. They're early dwarves in the very, very early wars between Orandul and the dwarves. Orandul didn't know what to do, and I won't go into all of that. But so he starts finding these dwarves out in the wilderness and corrupting them. He speaks to them, and when he speaks to them, the magic of Orandul, which is evil, falls into these dwarves, and it corrupts these dwarves. Now, when you read, I've written about 8 stories of each of these and they become the Eldritch Goblins. They're immortal. I've written about 8 stories of these. Some of them are very evil. Some of these Eldritch Goblins are extraordinarily evil, but some are not. There's this one, and it's one of my favorite. I can't remember how the whole story unfolds, but she lost her husband. Orandul finds her, corrupts her, and she just wants her husband back. So she takes his hat. She has his bloodied hat, and so long as she holds that hat, she remains immortal, and she can speak to her husband. So she's not evil by any stretch of the imagination, but she's definitely an Eldritch Goblin. So this player took this concept of the Eldritch Goblin, and she's just playing it, just kind of goofy, which is perfectly fine. It's perfect. Why wouldn't there be a bonehead Eldritch Goblin? Why not?
Exactly.
That's one of the things that I've tried to do with Airdhe, and I hope I succeeded, is just open it up to the player's creativity and the DM's creativity so they can run.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. So, I do want to talk about some of the other races from a character creation standpoint. Of course, the dwarves really being, as I've understood, it's the sort of the pride and the original race. Are there sort of your traditional types of, and I know your answer will be whatever you want to put into Airdhe, but in terms of how you've built it, do you have, hill dwarves and mountain dwarves and Druagar, or what are the nature of the dwarves that you have written into the lore of Airdhe?
There's no Druagar at all. No, and the closest thing to a hill dwarf would be a gnome. So the dwarves they're the first race to come alive, though they're not the first created. The giants and humans are actually created first, and gnomes, but they're imperfect, so the Allfather doesn't like them, so he sets them aside. But when he makes the dwarf and he gives the dwarves the breath of life, it spills across the forge and into those other creatures, the humans, giants, gnomes, and whatnots. and they gain life that way. But the dwarves are, for me, now I would never stop anyone from playing whatever they want.
Sure.
If you wanted to play this, gutter dwarf, like you said, go, do it, do it, do whatever you want to do. Because certainly there's going to be dwarves that are evil and mean, right? That can go off and do their thing. But the dwarves are I don't want to say humorless, but one of the things I don't like about what many TV shows and movies do is they've taken the dwarf and they've made it the kind of comical relief in the drama. And from my perspective, you would never see that from dwarves. They're not so much serious, but they're kind of serious about the oath of life that they gave the Allfather, which is basically the Andanuth, which means that they have to create something, whether that's like a sword that you make on a forge or goodwill. Either one of those things is creating something, right? They have to create something, so they take the Andanuth seriously, and that's how I play the dwarves. So the dwarves really, there's no real sub-races of the dwarves like you find in the elves, nor of the gnomes.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And even growing up, the two words I typically associate with dwarves were dour and taciturn. Now, that doesn't mean they can't have moments of levity, but I have seen some of that comic relief. Now, does that mean in the opening of Peter Jackson's The Hobbits, when they're doing all the stuff with the plate and getting Bilbo all rattled with what they're doing, did that bother me? No, it didn't. But hey, thank you so much, Patrick. Good to see Ancient Gamer in tonight. Thank you also, Toriano. Holy smokes, we're close to a hype train on a Wednesday night. We appreciate all that support. And thank you so much, Patrick. Patrick, I'm showing off that lightning source stuff all the time. We just gave away another one of the treasures of Greyhawk last night, and that was won by not Keith. Keith won the TLG gift card. Anyway, so back to the dwarves. I like the oath piece that plays into it. And again, it doesn't mean that they can't have a little bit of levity and humor, but they're not going to be the comic relief in Airdhe.
No, that would be. They're not the comic relief, and there certainly are dwarves who laugh all the time, who find life very humorous and find struggle just like me. And it's really, the Hobbit goes into this kind of special area because it's the Hobbit, right? It's a little bit different than Lord of the Rings. But even with, like, Gimli was given a little bit of a comic relief in the movies. He was kind of the one to break the tension. And I wouldn't carry that over into the world of Airdhe. So I don't know what I would use as a tension breaker. Probably humans.
Yeah. I think that's a humor, or maybe halflings. I don't know. Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering. This is kind of like a completely changing topic, but I know that we're starting. This is 100 years after the Unglar was defeated, right?
Yeah.
How have people been dealing with that? Like in this world, how has that everything been affected by Unglar now was here? Now no longer reigning and causing destruction. Like, obviously I'm sure it's gonna differ from place to place, from person to person, but I'm just very curious about the mindset.
So the wars and the Winterdark Wars take place over about 20 years, a 20-year time. And the one kingdom that, now, I'm going to talk in very specific, because as you get into the world of Airdhe, and the world of Airdhe is, I tried to include a broad swath of Earth ethnicity, so people can do whatever they want and play whatever ethnicity they want. That's very cool by me. But the game as it unfolded on the world behind us. So Kaomar becomes the kingdom that survives the Winterdark. It actually, in some kind of nascent form, though they were controlled by Unglar's people, it kind of survives. Now, when the players came back, when we recoalesced and we began running these games, one of their early objectives was to create kingdoms where, and whatever, political polieties, as I guess they would say, wherever they were. And they began doing that. It really starts with Kaomar on the one end and Grunlich Hole, the Dwarven kingdom, on the other. And once they've kind of cemented Grunlich Hole, they begin reconquering. And they began bribing, as Unglar starts losing, they began bribing some of his main lieutenants to turncoat on him. The kingdom of Augsburg is actually founded by one of Unglar's main generals. So, and he just kind of carves his own kingdom out of it and sets up this semi-feudal system. So you get these, but that's why you have so many different polieties in the lands of Ursel behind us, because different groups begin responding very, very differently. In the lands of New Eonoc, which is south of Austrag, those lands thrived under Unclar. They were merchant cities who were the center of trade for the entire world. Everything that was going to Abstract and everything that was going to Abstract went through New Aenon. So there's huge amounts of wealth in New Aenon. But each it's controlled by these mercantile families that control cities and small territories, and there's 7 of them down in that area. So they create, there's basically 2 city-states and 5 small principalities. And in order to give themselves some kind of structure in the collapsing world, they bring back the Enochian Empire, which if you remember, predated Unclar. And they have the Empress come in. She has the tattoo or the birthmark from the ancient lineage of Aenoch. So they create this empire that is very, very similar in makeup like the Holy Roman Empire that you will find in Earth history. A weak Empress, though she's not particular. She was weak, but that changes by the time y'all's game begins. She's garnered quite a bit of power there. So you have that, and you got Augsburg, which is really loosely based off of Mongolian kingdoms, horse soldiers and whatnot. You've got other kingdoms cropping up here and there. So each of these groups begin to kind of coalesce slowly over the next 100 years in different ways, and that's why you have such drastic different polities all over these lands of Ursula here. But the people themselves, it's a shock, and this is where the nice thing about, especially if you're playing human, the nice thing about humans in the world of Airdhe and the lands of Ursula specifically, and we all probably can relate to this, your grandparents are going to have grown up in the Winter Dark. When they were children, the world was locked in snow and ice, food was scarce, times were hard, the Empire controlled everything, the Cairnaruk were there, the Wizards of the Paths of Umber, you had no freedom or any of that stuff, and it all falls apart. So now as young people, you have no association with that. You're 20 years old, you're 2 generations later, so that the old people that you know, they might actually remember the days of Winter Dark, whereas you have no real connection to it. And because the sun has come back, the Wall of Worlds, what was it called? The Vale of Unclar, that's not right. Whatever Unclar's, the cloak that you put over the world, blocked out the light of sun, that is gone, the sun is back. And it's a time of plenty, right? Crops are being grown. If you compare it to the crops that were grown during the Winter Dark, it's tenfold greater. So there's more food, there's just a little bit of everything. So the people themselves kind of have this, yes, the old times were bad, but those are gone type approach. It's just a little bit different. And it gives you as a player a lot of wiggle room to go whichever direction you want. And if you're someone who's 200 years old, like a dwarf or an elf or a gnome, you're gonna have been a child during the Winter Dark. You're gonna have remembered all that stuff and seen the changes as they go. So to answer your question, the shock is it is relieved somewhat, and that's not the right word, but it's lessened somewhat because the Winter Dark Wars take 20 years. And then the next 20 to 30 years, there's actually this lots of civil strife, war, as people are kind of reform in the chaos of Unclar's departure. The one constant is they all slew anything associated with Unclar. Priests, wizards, assassins. If you see that Unclar symbol, I should have sent it to you, John. It's a beautiful symbol that Zoe did for us. It's a tree, a stylized tree with a crown over it and his mace beneath it. It's just this beautiful symbol. But anyone bearing that symbol is burned at the stake almost immediately by everyone.
Yeah, please send me that art. I'd love to have that.
I think it is a beautiful piece.
I'm loving this piece here. This everybody here knows that I am a sucker for Dark Sun and Brahm. This has a little bit of that color palette and style to it. I could see that sitting somewhere in Athos.
That's Peter Bradley, and that's a ranger looking over the darkened vault. Peter is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, very, very cool stuff. Okay, great questions, though, Rachel. Any other questions you have? Or actually, what we could do, because I know Robert has all kinds of stuff that we can direct the conversation to. Hey, Bill, the Master Crafter, good to see you in tonight, my friend. Rachel, go ahead and show Steven. You showed Robert and I, but hold up the page. So she's writing a backstory for her Airdhe character, but she doesn't have it. This is not her backstory. This is just the outline. She's got four pages of outline plus a chart. Let's see the chart.
Find it. I have a lot of papers here.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, so this is the outline that she's building. That from that she will create her character backstory. So, is there anything that you've written in there that now that you have Stephen on the line here, you'd like to ask him about or get some guidance in terms of what you were thinking for your character backstory? Obviously, you don't want to give away too much to the audience. We want that to be uncovered. But is there anything you'd like to ask him?
One thing that I'm really curious about is that eventually my character is no longer going to be with her parents. Obviously, we all started off as urchins, and so we got to end up in Altamira one way or another. And something that I was curious about is that, are there common ways to get through the Twilight Forest? Because Altamira is kind of surrounded by it, correct?
Right, yeah. So are you playing a human?
I am playing a human.
Okay, and are you from Altamira?
I am not from Altamira.
Okay, so the Twilight Wood is its name makes it sound worse than it is. It's not, so there's no Drow elves in the world of Airdhe. The Twilight elves, they become the Twilight elves because they survived the Winter Dark because of the, now his name escapes me. There's two gods of dreams. There's Luther, and then there's another one, the other god of dreams. Now this, and he's really the god of nightmares, but not portrayed in an evil fashion. Not like dreams are good and nightmares are evil. Nightmares are just unsettling things, right? So when he comes to the Twilight Wood, he dwells in the Twilight Wood. The elves kind of attach themselves to him, and they evolve. They're morphed into the Twilight elves, and they live in these woods. And the woods begin to reflect his vision of the world, of his way of fighting Unklar, right? Of that god's. I gotta find a god's name. It's driving me crazy. But the Twilight Wood becomes more a land of fairy than it does evil and darkness and whatnot. So is I'm trying to find here in the is it Utumno that's the other Lord of Dreams? Utumno. Yes,
okay.
That's the one. Yes.
Nice. Go right,
He's
John.
the Lord of Nightmares. So it becomes more of a land of Fae. Now, there's two sides to this coin. Most humans don't want to go in there, right? Because Fae are never portrayed, or rarely portrayed in Airdhe as evil creatures. And they're really, in Castles of Crusades, they're very evil creatures. They're really just mischievous, and they don't have any kind of understanding that their mischievous nature might really hurt a mortal, right? They're gonna make you do something that they find is rather humorous, but might get you killed. So, but they don't have any conception of death, so they can't think along those lines. So the Twilight Wood, as a land of Fae, is somewhere that a human would go very nervous. Anyone would go, dwarf, human, even a normal elf would go, because the Fae can be very feckless. So your character, as an urchin, having lost or fled, or however you built it in your character, fleeing into the Twilight Wood sort of works, because you might fear the Fae, but you also know that no one's going to pursue you, right? No one's going to come after you. And maybe you don't fear the Fae at all. Maybe you're okay with their feckless nature, and you've just accepted that, and you wander into it. So however you kind of design your character. So to answer your question, there are almost no roads through the Twilight Wood. The trade that will develop in Altamira will be almost all riverborne, but there will be a couple of tracks and whatnot that kind of predate everything. But the Twilight Wood is just think of a forest of Fae. What was the movie? I liked there was two of them. Damn it. Where Queen of the Fairies, what's her name? She was married to Brad Pitt. I can't remember these two.
Angelina Jolie.
Angelina Jolie, she played
Malevolent. Maleficent, yeah. Malevolent, Maleficent, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that one.
Think of that forest as opposed to, like an evil drow kingdom or something.
I'm not going to lie. The Codex description of the Twilight Wood is a little spookier than that. I mean, the trees do not sound like they look like normal trees. The birds and yeah, it's not someplace I would think.
And I have not read that, but would those trees be the sentients?
No, I don't think so. If I remember correctly, now they may be. I'd have to dig back to that lore, but I think those are kind of woken by Autumno. The whole forest itself was really designed this way to keep Unklar out. There's very few places Unklar cannot go. But when he goes into the Twilight Wood, it's confusing. He doesn't know what's real and what isn't real. Because Unklar is a god of law and evil. It sees the world in a very ordered way. Yeah, and if you get into Unklar's mind, he thinks he's the good guy. He's like, yeah, he sees the Allfather. The Allfather wanted the world to be like this, and you guys have messed it all up. Let me fix it for you, you know?
Right.
He's wrong, but that's the way he sees it. So the Twilight Wood confuses him. The Sea of Dreams confuses him. And in the big lore of things, part of the reason it confuses him is when the Allfather is, to circle the whole conversation back to the beginning, when Onlus, the goblin, splinters the Allfather's mind, he recoalesces in the Sea of Dreams. The Sea of Dreams is actually the Allfather kind of rebuilding everything from scratch up. So that spills out through Autumno, and Unklar can't understand it, he can't defeat it. It's just too much.
No, you're right, Robert. I love that description. The peculiar leaves, dark and fleshy with white veins, absorb the light of the moon, growing thick and long, lingering overhead as a headman's axe. Love it. Well done.
Scary.
I want to go there. Exactly what I want to be.
Rachel, if your character is fleeing some people or some instance or whatever that happens to be that's your motivation, no one's going to follow you there, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
I will keep that in mind.
All right, Robert. So what other questions do you have? We've got about 15, 20 minutes left before we're going to get ready to raid into Jay. But yeah.
Yeah, you kind of touched on this a little earlier, but I was wondering, actually have somewhere where it's kind of laid out what the different influences for the different areas were? Like you mentioned, Mongolian influence for Augsburg and such.
I do, in the original Codex of Airdhe, it's in the foreword I kind of wrote to give some direction to folks. But I dropped it in the one that's actually fixing to go to print very soon. But yeah, so man, it's a lot, because if you look at what I tried to do when I created it, like I mentioned earlier, I wanted whoever settles in this world can play whatever they want. So if you look at Brindisium, they dress like Romans. If you look at Tegean, it's Greek society. It's ancient Greek society. If you look at Angoulême and Siena, it's medieval France, Germany, what have you. I tried to come. The Punj is very close to it. That's kind of, the Mongolians are really to the right. They're the Madru's a whole society that dwells there. Augsburg is based on more of a, I can't remember, was it the Poles, who really didn't have a feudal system, but they won, where soldiers were rewarded, and I think, was that Poland? I can't remember what society that was. But I tried to give it all to everybody.
Yeah, because, well, you just mentioned Angoulême being France. Was that how you, was that why you slipped Avignon in there?
So, if you look,
I did not miss that one.
If you look carefully, so Tegea is actually Sparta had a lot of allies in the Lacedaemonian, in the peninsula. Tegea was their most ferocious. They stayed by the Spartans all the time. So I yanked that right out of history and put it into the world of Airdhe. Now, Angoulême is actually the respelling of a French province. This Angoulme or whatever the hell it is. And I just kind of spelled it an anglicized, spelling of it, so you could pronounce it as it was spelled. So you'll see a whole lot of my PhD work spill into this as I was creating names.
I love that.
I was like, certain things sounded German. A lot of things sounded Germanic, and I'm like, Avignon. Yeah, okay.
No, I love that. But Stephen, is there a key for this anywhere? That, because as a DM, I always like that. When I even look at Greyhawk, or I think about what different nationalities might sound like in different people groups, we can create things which are completely unique, but we all draw something derivative from our experience and our own language exposure. And so I don't mind getting guidance that says, okay, this should have a Germanic sort of sound and flavor. This should have perhaps maybe more of an Anglo sound and flavor. This might have a sub-Saharan sound and flavor, or whatever it might be. Is there a sort of a cheat key, or should we just extract that from the descriptions of the cultures in the book?
There was a cheat key, and there's going to be one very soon.
Okay.
You're right. I mean, I don't know why I took it out of the second codex. I'm pretty sure I did, because in the first it's in there, but now it's written in part of the fourth. But it needs to be a straight up Tegia Greek, Brindisium Roman.
Exactly. Yes. And it's still just a guidance. If somebody wants to make it something else, they can. But as a DM, if you want to have something that you can have as a guide that you can follow, it takes a lot of the work off of it for you, and then you can just sort of adapt that culture, and you can give descriptions that they don't have to be identical to their earthly counterpart, but they have that sort of flavor or that homage. That's a fantastic thing for a DM.
Yeah, let me tell you, so one of the things I struggle with as a writer when I'm creating this stuff is I won't shut up. So I'm writing this Codex of the Planes right now, and each plane has a section called Time, Weather, so that you can read it and know what time is like in this particular plane, right? Or what kind of weather, what kind of seasons. And they're all like, I'm writing this stuff, it's like a whole paragraph. And I'm thinking to myself, no GM needs this. They just need to know, is there weather patterns? That's all they need. So I created a table before it, so I can expound whatever, but there's a quick reference table. And that's exactly what that needs. If you read the entire codex, much like Robert, you're going to pick up on stuff. Avignon, I recognize this. Aachen, if you look at Aachen, that's a city in southern Germany. That's where my brother was stationed during the army, so I just yanked it, put it into the map.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to know that unless they're familiar with it. So there will be a cheat done, probably by Monday.
I love it. I love it. You heard it.
I put it on my little notes to do.
In case anyone's wondering why I'm keep harping on Avignon for for those who are not familiar, Avignon was where the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy was moved to for quite some time, and led to a point where there was a fight to move it back, and multiple popes, and all kinds of fun history.
So now the interesting thing about Avignon specifically, so you'll see a lot of borrowing in the world, but Avignon specifically, I borrowed it, but then I developed a whole thing around it. As many of you may remember, Airdhe is actually Venus a billion years ago, or whatever time frame you want it to be. So Avignon is going to be a city that's almost timeless. It exists in Airdhe and Earth and in other places simultaneously. It'll be a very, very magical kingdom. So if you're playing Amazing Adventures, which is our multi-genre version of Castles and Crusades, and you're playing in modern Germany, in 1922, you can go to the city of Avignon and find portals that'll take you to the Avignon in the world of Airdhe, which of course will be a ruin to Venus at that point, through the Rings of Brass. So Avignon's going to become, and this will come out in the Codex of the Plains, it'll become kind of this focal point of everything.
That's cool.
Fantastic. So, and also that gave Robert a chance to flex some of his historical knowledge. Do you feel better now, Robert?
Oh, I feel
all right, so just by word of a couple of announcements, we have about 10, 12 minutes left, and then we're going to raid right into Jay. Tonight on Jay's stream, he's got Greyhawk Mike with him. It's Legends and Lore, episode 164, and he's going to have Anna B. Meyer, and they're talking about the ruins of Greyhawk, so that'll be a really fun show tonight. Reminder again, on Sunday, Chuck from Troll Lord Games will be running a one-shot. Amanda told me that we already have 3 players now, so there could be 1 or 2 slots left if they have not already filled up, and if you're interested in playing with Chuck, he's a fun DM. He'll be featuring the world of Airdhe and, of course, playing Castles and Crusades. So make sure you check that out on Sunday. And then Tuesday, we'll have a special one-shot from Robert. He described it a little bit earlier, but it should be a lot of fun. And then we'll be launching our new Tears of Airdhe campaign Sunday, September 4th. And we will be, I haven't really mentioned this, but I want to talk about this for just a moment. Tears of Airdhe will be a bi-weekly campaign. So, I would say that wrong. Every other week we'll be playing in Tears of Airdhe. On the intermediate or the intervening weeks, every other week, our own Rory, who plays Anaho in Greyhawk Awakening, will be streaming another game in Greyhawk. So we have another Greyhawk game, and it's called Fall of the Red Dawn. And he's given me a quick summary here. Fall of the Red Dawn it's got a really cool background. It's 5 red cloak wizards seeking artifacts, and I won't say too much. It's going to be a really, really fun, kind of a different campaign and story, and they will be starting out here real soon after us. So you'll have Tears of Airdhe, and then you'll have Fall of the Red Dawn alternating back and forth on Sundays, and of course Greyhawk Awakening Book 2 will be continuing every Tuesday night once I get back to it a week from this Tuesday. So thanks everybody for all the support, and we had a level 3.5 hype train tonight, and just great support from the Mad Chatters. So while we kind of come in for a landing here with a couple of more questions, I want to open it up to the chat. And Mad Chatters, please let us know if you have any other questions that you'd like to ask of Stephen, and or if you have questions for Rachel, for example. You want to know something about her D&D background or what she's looking forward to, or and I'll just do this one more time because we have more people watching than we did at the start. If you'd like to dispel the notion that you're in middle school, you can do that as well. And this won't be all the time, Rachel. You just got to let me a couple of times here. We'll get started. She said it was okay. She said it was okay, everybody.
I gave the consent.
She did.
I promise I am not a minor. I am 20 years old. I'm in college.
So any Mad Chatters that you have questions, go ahead. I don't know. Stephen did not give me a Dr. Pepper, Toriano. I don't know why. Yes, and Jay. So Jay, I need to give you a call. I'm excited about Gavin on Sunday night. I had a change in schedule. I might be a few minutes late. I want to make sure that's going to be okay with you. So I'll call you tonight or first thing in the morning, and we'll make sure all that's going to sync up. I had a change in scheduling that I found out about today, but I think it should still work out okay. All right. And so, yeah, exactly. All right. Cameron. Is Cameron in the chat? Oh, there she is. Hello, Cameron. We missed you tonight. But Rachel's holding down the fort, and she only talked bad about you a couple of times, and then she cleaned it up once I reprimanded her. So
Thomas got the brunt of it.
Well, Thomas deserves it. Okay, so Mad Chatters, any other questions? In the meantime, Robert, how would you like to bring us home? Ask us a couple more things, or Stephen, if you have something really pressing that you'd like to share with us. I mentioned a little bit about like political factions or maybe major military actions. What other things would be going on currently in the world of Airdhe, as you have written it, that might influence how someone would create a character?
Well, it kind of depends on where the CKDM is going to begin. Where you guys are beginning in Out of Airdhe is really, really cool, because you're kind of out of the mainstream of anything, which gives you running the game and everyone in it kind of freedom to do whatever you want. You don't have any of these kind of pressures that are dragging one way or the other. There's no epic arcs going on, if that makes sense.
Yes.
The biggest thing that is going on at the moment, the Empress. So the way that in New Aeonach, when that group of 7 Pleiades gathered together and said, we need some kind of structure, they invited the Empress in once they discovered that she was legitimate, and they set up this political arrangement where they get all of these powers, but she has the power to create new principalities. Right? She can't take anything from them. She can't take any of their rights away, but she can create new ones. So she immediately just called for a crusade. And knowing that these 7 principalities are all kind of blocked now, they can't expand one way or the other, but all of the land to the north and the east and the west of her, she can grow into. So she called a crusade, and anyone who goes before her and swears an oath of fealty and goes out and conquers anything that's not held by those 7 Pleiades gets to own it, so long as they become her, it's not liege. The liege is the Lord. What is the one that's not the liege? Robert, what is
the vassal?
The vassal, yes, thank you. Good Lord. They become the vassal of the Empress. And then they get to do their thing, but they got to pay taxes and serve, send soldiers and what have you, and all that business. So what's happened in the intervening 70 years, that kingdom that that polity. She started out very weak. She is not so weak anymore because she's created all these very small baronies, knightly holdings, and all the stuff that are beholden to her and her alone. So that, I believe, that's where your game's eventually going to go. Your people in Altamira are going to end up in the A series. Is that right?
That is currently the plan. I may mess around with that a little bit, but yes.
Yeah, if that's the way you go, that dovetails beautifully, because the A series takes place in New Anna. That dovetails beautifully with that whole kind of thematic thing, which is probably the largest current political movement that's going on. You've got other things like the Punj to the far, and I misspoke earlier. The only kingdom left that the only two kingdoms left that openly worships Unclar is the Punj and the Hlobane orcs in the Red Hills. And the Punj was never conquered, never overthrown. They're kind of built like the Russian Tsarist states, to put it in a real world setting. And they're the only kingdom that actually has, relatively primitive, but actually has cannons that they will roll onto the battlefield.
Okay, and that might be changed a little bit in my. I really avoid gunpowder like the plague in my games. I don't know why. It's just my own particular style. Dinosaurs and gunpowder don't make it into my games. So
I'm generally the same way. I don't like gunpowder. I don't even know how that kind of eked into the game, but it did. And gunpowder in Airdhe, it's written up in the player's guide area, is very, very dangerous. It explodes frequently, to the detriment of he who uses it. Because I'm like you, John, I really don't.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Triskelef, that's Joffrey, and he's a really cool guy. I had a call with him today. He's got a really interesting website that's going to be launching that everyone will want to see here, be by the end of the year, that is useful for any type of gaming, can be a help to GMs, content creators, players. But he had a great question. He wants to know who has the Troll House cookies. That fits right in with the mad chatters. We are the puns abound here in this community. So, but you just got to be careful, because once you start it, yeah, Greek fire. Yeah, I might. That's now you're getting a little closer to what I might allow. Gun-toting dinosaurs. No, that is not going to happen.
I did have one more question.
Go ahead.
Related to the area. So, what is the current relationship or current state of things between the Twilight Elves and the Elves of Fontenoy, since they're High Elves versus...
The Twilight Elves are very secretive, quiet, moonlit, travel in very, small groups and keep to just stay hidden. They really, and it's part of their culture that developed under Unclar stuff. So the Fontenoy Elves are the polar opposite of that. They live in these tall towered buildings, small towers, little castles and keeps all over the place. Very learned, very intelligent, steeped in sorcery, but still filled with that ardor that they had for having to suppress fighting evil for 1,000 years. So their whole thing is to destroy evil in all of its facets. So that the Twilight Elves and the Fontenoy Elves don't really get along so much. The Twilight Elves are not evil by any stretch of the imagination, but frequently what they do or what they condone allows evil to happen, right? They rarely actively try to stop it. Now they will if something comes into the wood, whatever. But like I mentioned earlier, Fae can be relatively feckless, so evil can come of the actions unintentionally, and the Fontenoy have absolutely zero tolerance for it.
That makes sense.
They're kind of jackasses. Now that said, if you ever want to play a Fontenoy now, don't feel like you're constrained to that only. You can be someone like, who is it, Michael Moorcock's Corum, which are my favorite of the Eternal Champions. Corum doesn't really fit in with his society, so you can certainly say, I'm not that guy. I'm going to play a different. You can certainly do. You just come from a very learned, wealthy, steeped in sorcery family.
Yeah, no, good question. Good question. And so as we're wrapping up here, we're looking at the weather patterns of Airdhe. We also have the human migration patterns of Airdhe, which I can pull up, and just all kinds of really neat supplements that as a GM you can use to add that sense of depth and reality to your game. And Stephen, when you went through this, how did you go about sort of imagining the migration patterns and how humanity had spread throughout?
Well, it's all kind of stabbed around the Goblin Dwarf Wars, because the humans at first they linger near. That's not true at all. I think that they actually migrations begin earlier because they're picked up by Mordias. They dwell in that. So on the far left of the map that you're showing now, that's where the forge is. That's where the dwarves first appear. And the humans are kind of sprawled out, and it's kind of an arid land, and they begin to wander.
So where would that be? Would that be in the sort of the Engale area, or the early Mwen, or where, when you say the left of the map, where would that be?
Okay. So the Engale, that's a group of humans that go north. So just south of where that mountain chain, where that arrowhead is, south of the E, is probably going to be.
Okay.
And then, that's where the main Dwarven kingdom sits. And now the name of it is it begins with a name. There's 13 Dwarven kingdoms, and that's where the main one, the first of the Dwarven kings dwelt there. That's where the Mammoth scrolls are. That thing is sacked and destroyed by the goblins at one point and looted, and it's a gigantic place filled with knowledge and lore from the ancient world. But the humans, because the Allfather doesn't pay any attention to them, he really doesn't pay much attention to the dwarves either. Once he creates them, he goes on to doing other things. The humans and the giants both just begin wandering. But they do break up into these groups, these kind of like-minded groups, and those are the 13 tribes, which kind of equate the 13 tribes that we see in human, I think it's Judaism has the 13 tribes, or however that plays out. So I try to keep some of that real-world stuff here, so that if you want to play it off into the earth, you can do that. And then these peoples begin wandering and settling all over the place. Now, because there's the dwarves do that and they don't. The dwarves create these kingdoms and then these minor kingdoms, but there are dwarves who just head out. They don't want anything to do with the Allfather or any of this stuff, so they just wander, and they're constantly interacting with these humans. So you don't have anywhere in the world of Airdhe where there's a technological difference between one of these groups and another. Everybody is really on the same playing field. The only real difference that you would get would be the dwarves are going to be better at creating stuff, and that's largely because of the knowledge they picked up from the Allfather and the Andanuth itself, and that becomes their driving focus as a people. But at no point do you have where civilizations clash, where one is going to be Stone Age and one is going to be Iron Age.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, dwarves spread everything equally all over the place.
I like that. And dwarves is my favorite D&D race. I like having them as the progenitors. All right, so all right, so we're gonna close off. We're gonna raid into Jay here, but real quick, any final questions or thoughts from either Rachel or Robert before we close off?
I love learning more about this world. Just the amount of thought and love that you put into it and how you talk about it is so infectious. It gets me so excited and thrilled to be a part of this, and I'm so excited.
Thank you for that, and it is awesome to see you handwriting that background. That is so cool. It immediately reminded me of those first letters I wrote.
Yeah. It's a lot.
So I have one question. What's the next section of the world of Airdhe outside, or is there any plans for any of the sections outside the cradle to be detailed?
So I know that Chuck is working on the Unklu in the south. So each of these are kind of broken up into sections that very, very vaguely represent Earth-type ethnicities. So I think it's CERN, and I can't remember the other one now. Up in the northeastern part would be more the Asian, that area, and then there's a wall of stuff in the center is going to be more African. The Inklu is going to be more Native American, South American, indigenous people, stuff like that. So whatever society you kind of want to put together, I've left that open to do. As for myself, I've begun developing the stuff to the immediate east of the lands of Ursul, the cradle of the world, and that's where one of the tribes, the Madru, live, and they're very, very, very based on Mongolian movements, the way that whole subgroup, that ethnic group is built. So I'm kind of pushing my way to the moral. But as you can tell, if you look at the whole world map, it's a huge amount of. It's huge. It's a lot of work.
Yes.
That did not escape my notice.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, and it's great work. And Stephen, I want to say thank you again so much for coming on with us. We're really excited, and we hope that you're going to enjoy the way that we explore and tell stories inside the world of Airdhe. I think it's going to be so much fun. I want to say thank you again to all the Mad Chatters tonight, and we will see you hopefully on Sunday as we have Chuck from Troll Lord Games DMing a one-shot for us. The reminder, Virtual Greyhawk Con is coming up here in early October. It's just around the corner. Enjoy Jay's stream tonight. And we have one question for you if you're watching tonight and you haven't followed, or if you're a follower who hasn't subbed. Rachel, do you know the question?
Will you follow and sub?
Can you message it in our Zoom here so she'll know? All right, so if people are already putting in the chat, all the Mad Chatters know. If you are watching tonight and you have not followed, if you're a follower who has not subbed, or if you're a sub whose sub has expired, say it's not so. We have one question for you tonight. What are you doing? Come on, give us a follow, give us a sub. Blue Box, we'll be right back on Sunday. We're going to raid Jay here in 10 seconds. And as we get ready to jump in with a good crew of raids, should be close to 40, I think we have raiding into Jay tonight. That's fantastic. I want to say again, thank you to all the Mad Chatters. Thank you to my guests. Yes, and exactly 40 people raiding into Jay. Great night. Thank you, everyone. Blue Box signing out.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.